students so they can complete the school instead of having them go halfway and then drop out. That's one of my main concerns that I have.
I'd like to see both candidates address issues and not make personal attacks. Why we should vote for one of them over the other.
What are they planning to do to improve the traffic in Atlanta area?
I'd like to see them talk about what they're really going to do. I mean, as far as healing the country.
How are you going to make this district a better place for us to live?
And again, in our newsroom right now, where everyone is working tonight on this debate that comes up live on Channel 2 at 8 p.m. We'll be streaming it on our website as well. We'll be taking questions on Twitter and Facebook. You can communicate to us in just about any way you want to on social media this evening. I am going to leave the newsroom and go into the studio now, where Republican Karen Handel and Democrat Jon Ossoff will be going head-to-head live for the very first time in a one-on-one debate that's coming up on Channel 2 at 8 o'clock. Good evening again, everyone. Thank you for joining us on WSB-TV.com. I'm Jovita Moore. I am now live in the debate studio where this primetime live debate is going to be happening at 8 o'clock, just a few minutes from now. Republican Karen Handel, Democrat Jon Ossoff will debate one-on-one for the first time that you will see only on Channel 2. Let me show you around just a little bit. Our moderator, my co-anchor, Justin Farmer, he'll be here in just a few minutes moderating the debate from here. We have two interns currently standing by. This is where the candidates will be, the Democrat and Republican vying for the 6th Congressional District seat. They're going to be here in just a few minutes. Our panelists joining us this evening, Channel 2's Richard Elliott, WSB Radio's Candace Presley, and the AJC's political reporter, Greg Bluestein. So we thank you all for being here. We're just on WSB-TV.com right now, letting folks know what's going on behind the scenes as we are getting ready. Justin is here.
Hello,
taking his
Jovita.
place. Thank you for joining us. You ready?
Are we on TV?
Excited? We're on WSB-TV.com right now.
Hello, people.
You ready to go?
Yeah, this is great. I mean, as you know, this is the center of attention tonight politically.
Right.
And we've got a lot of buzz and enthusiasm, and our job tonight is to get past the television ads and get a little deeper.
Get a little deeper, ask some questions, try to talk about issues.
That's right.
Maybe not so much personalities.
That's right.
Right. Okay. Well, it'll be an interesting hour. I know you need to get mic'd up and get into place. We have video of the candidates arriving here at WSB a little while ago. They were both here ready to go. We have video of the Democrat, Jon Ossoff, joining us at the WSB building earlier today. And then we also have video of Karen Handel when she arrived. I am told that there are supporters on both sides outside of our building here at 1601 West Peachtree as well. So it's going to be an interesting night, a lot happening. I also want to show you, it's a little dark over here, but if we can take a look, we have media here from not only around the country, but locally as well. There is a reporter here from the Boston Globe, from CNN, Politico, the Washington Post, Telemundo, the Washington Examiner. We have local TV stations here, the NBC affiliate, the CBS affiliate as well, all here to cover this debate and bring it to you through their social media channels and their news organizations. So that was something that we wanted to do. The Associated Press is here. Of course, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution is in the building as well. So it is going to be an interesting hour. I am now going to head into the control room. That's where producers and directors are making their final preparations for the debate. Again, coming up only on Channel 2 starting at 8 o'clock. Good evening again, everyone. Thank you for joining us here on WSB-TV.com. I'm Jovita Moore. I am now standing in one of our control rooms. This is where our show producer and our directors, engineers, everyone making final preparations for the debate coming up, the 6th Congressional District debate that you will see only live on Channel 2 coming up at 8 o'clock, just a few minutes from now. They are getting everything ready here. We have the monitors up. Everyone is set in the studio. We just showed you a minute ago the moderator. Of course, my co-anchor, Justin Farmer, our panelists who will be asking questions. Both candidates are here, ready to go. And we also have media from local media and also media from across the country covering this debate tonight. As you know, the eyes of the country will be on Georgia tonight, waiting to see how each candidate does in this debate and then see what happens on that runoff, coming up on June 20th. So we are counting down just a few minutes from now. We're going to start. I'm going to head into the studio where I'll be hosting our post-debate coverage and conversation. We have a team of experts and analysts that will be sitting with me to break down how tonight's debate really shaped up and how it's going to shape the remainder of this race. So I'm going to head that way and see you in a few minutes. Hello again, everyone. I'm Jovita Moore. Thanks for watching us on WSB-TV.com. Right now, I'm in our news studio. You see our giant clock here. We are counting down to the live debate coming up just a few minutes from now on Channel 2. You will see only on Channel 2 tonight a debate between the two candidates for the 6th Congressional District, Democrat Jon Ossoff and Republican Karen Handel, going live in a primetime debate in just about 7 minutes from now. So I am in the studio where I'm going to be sitting for and talking for a post-debate coverage here on WSB-TV.com. We have several experts who are going to be in here tonight kind of breaking down the key moments from the debate and also talking about how the debate tonight shapes the rest of this race going forward with, of course, the runoff scheduled for Tuesday, June 20th. And we're going to have more also tonight coming up on the Channel 2 Action News Night Beat at 11. So that debate is now just about 7 minutes away, live on Channel 2. I'm going to be back live here on WSB-TV.com when the debate ends. We're going to have key moments and also some insight from a team of experts that we put together who talk with us often about politics in Georgia. They'll be here with us tonight, and we hope to see you then.
I'm Tim McVeigh, Vice President and General Manager of WSB-TV Channel 2. Here at WSB-TV, we have a long history of bringing candidates together to debate the issues that are important to the people they serve. Georgia's 6th Congressional District has attracted national attention from both parties. Tonight, we have devoted an hour of comprehensive primetime coverage for this debate. It's your chance to hear from the 2 remaining candidates and where they stand on issues that are important to you. Stay with us.
From a crowded field of 18 candidates down to the final 2, tonight, the eyes of the nation are on Georgia for what has become the most expensive race of its kind in U.S. history. This is the WSB 6th Congressional District Debate, live from the WSB-TV studios in Midtown Atlanta. Here's your moderator, Justin Farmer.
Good evening, and welcome to this live debate for Georgia's 6th Congressional District. I'm Justin Farmer. This is the first runoff debate and the only one live in prime time. We also want to welcome everyone who is watching from Georgia and around the nation on our Facebook page and at WSB-TV.com, or maybe you're listening this evening on WSB Radio. So let's set the scene tonight, as this race is not only important to Georgians, it's getting a lot of national attention.
So help me God. So help me God. Congratulations.
With this swearing-in ceremony, Georgia officially needed a new member of Congress to send to Washington. Representative Tom Price left his seat in the 6th District when asked to join the Trump administration as Secretary of Health and Human Services. Replacement candidates quickly emerged. It was a crowded field of 18, all hoping to become Georgia's newest member of Congress. The 6th District, covering parts of Cobb, DeKalb, and Fulton counties, has been a Republican stronghold for decades. Price's predecessors include now U.S. Senator from Georgia, Johnny Isakson, and former House Speaker Newt Gingrich. On April 18th, the field narrowed to 2, Democrat Jon Ossoff and Republican Karen Handel, both winning the top 2 spots for a place in the runoff.
Very pleased with the result and ready to fight on to June.
Very exciting, and what happened last night was very encouraging.
The eyes of the nation, particularly in Washington, quickly turned to Georgia. Money has been pouring in from around the country, making this race the most expensive congressional race in history. Here's what's at stake. Out of the 435 seats in the House, 239 are currently held by Republicans. Democrats hold 193 seats. 3 seats, including the Georgia 6th, are vacant. With a win in Georgia, Republicans are hoping to solidify their stronghold in Congress, while Democrats are hoping to make a statement against President Trump in a traditionally Republican district. Some say the results could foreshadow midterm election results in 2018. And now it is time, so let's meet the candidates. We determined podium position tonight by drawing. First, Republican Karen Handel. Ms. Handel is a former Georgia Secretary of State and Fulton County Commission Chair. She also has experience in executive management. And Democrat Jon Ossoff. Mr. Ossoff is a former congressional aide, businessman, and investigative filmmaker. We thank you both for being here tonight at WSB. And to question the candidates, I am joined by our panel. Greg Bluestein, political reporter with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Candace Presley, manager of programming operations for WSB Radio. And Channel 2 political reporter Richard Elliott. Each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to questions tonight, 30 seconds for rebuttal at my discretion. I have the first question this evening, and it is for each of you. It is clear that the world is being terrorized. How far do you think the United States should go to protect all of us, its citizens? For example, the president says he believes that a travel ban is part of the answer. What do you say? And by coin toss, we start with Ms. Handel.
Thank you. Thank you. I believe it's necessary to do everything we possibly can to protect American interests and particularly American citizens. So in terms of the president's travel proposal, it is a temporary, limited halt for 6 countries that are known to harbor terrorists. I do not, let me be clear, I do not support a religious litmus test, but I do support vetting individuals coming into this country, particularly from those countries. We need to give the Homeland Security team time to evaluate the criteria that they're using for the vetting so that we can make sure that individuals coming into this country are not set on terrorizing our citizens.
Mr. Ossoff.
Well, we need a strong counterterrorism policy to protect our territory, the territory of our allies, from threats that are homegrown and who seek to infiltrate our territory and conduct attacks. We need strong intelligence sharing relationships with our allies. And we need to continue to take it to ISIS in Syria and Iraq, applying U.S. air power in coordination with local partners such as the Kurds, with the very limited deployment of U.S. Special Operations Forces. What we should not do is get drawn into a major ground war in Iraq and Syria. We can accomplish our objectives in Iraq and Syria through the use of air power in coordination with those local partners.
So yes or no on a temporary travel ban, Mr. Ossoff?
Well, I think that a policy which restricts travel simply on the basis of the country of origin from which a traveler emerges is not effective. We need an intelligence-driven approach. We need an approach that identifies threats before they attempt to enter the country, and then an approach that polices threats that emerge from within the United States within the bounds of the Constitution.
Richard Elliott.
And to piggyback on that question a bit, this will be for both of you. We've seen terrorist attacks in the UK and what is believed to be a terrorist attack at Notre Dame in France just this afternoon. What can we do to keep Americans safe? And this is the important part, without sacrificing freedoms, without sacrificing individual liberties. I'll start with you, Mr. Ossoff.
Sure. Well, first of all, we have to ensure that our counterterrorism authorities and our police forces have all of the authorities that they need necessary to ensure that they can identify threats before they emerge and before they can conduct attacks within the bounds of the Constitution, within the bounds of Fourth Amendment protections. And we have to aggressively increase intelligence sharing with, for example, our British partners and our French partners to ensure that U.S. agencies, which become aware of threats that may emerge in those countries, can alert our allies and assist them in preventing such attacks before they occur.
And Ms. Handel, just 1 second, let me follow up. But what can we do to protect the individual liberties? You know, people are worried about the NSA spying on ourselves, tapping into our phones and things like that. How can we, what's the balance that can be done?
Well, there is, of course, always a balance to be struck between ensuring that our intelligence services and our police forces have the authorities necessary to conduct an effective counterterrorism program, while also ensuring that American civil liberties and privacies are not unduly infringed upon. We have a record, I think, of through the courts and through aggressive congressional oversight, holding the executive branch accountable to ensure that they don't overstep. But that's why we need independent leadership in Congress rather than a career politician, because we need independent leadership to conduct aggressive oversight and assure that the country is kept safe, and so too are our privacy and civil liberties protected.
Ms. Handel, do you have anything to add on this before our next question?
Thank you. I do. First of all, we need to make sure that we fully fund our military and that we have a member in Congress like myself who is going to be a strong supporter of our military, unlike the individual for whom my opponent worked, Hank Johnson. We need to make sure that we are insisting that our UN partners are carrying their fair share when it comes to fighting terrorism around the country or around the world. Additionally, we must fully fund the military so that the men and women that we are asking to go out and preserve our freedoms and fight against the terrorists have the resources that they need to do the job that we are asking them to do. Of course, no one wants to infringe upon personal liberties here in the United States, but at the same time, enough is enough. We have to step up and do whatever is necessary to protect American interests as well as the American people.
Congress Presley.
Speaking of infringing on an individual's personal liberties, Ms. Handel, I wanted to ask you a question. There's an email circulating by Congressman-elect from Montana, Greg Gianforte. It's a fundraising email on your behalf. You'll know that he made news before the election after an altercation with a reporter breaking the man's glasses. Now, after he won the election, he did apologize, but you're allowing him to raise money for you. Are the voters of the 6th to take that to say you're kind of okay with his behavior and what he did?
First of all, let me clear that up. He is not fundraising for me. That fundraiser used my name and it raised money for some other entity, but I can assure you not a penny from that fundraising email came to the Karen Handel campaign. Secondly, of course I do not condone that kind of behavior. Unfortunately, in the world of campaigning right now, on both sides of the political aisle, individuals have become incredibly aggressive towards the candidates. I experienced it myself personally on Memorial Day when a reporter supposedly representing some very liberal Democratic organization almost literally accosted me at a Memorial Day program. So that kind of behavior is unacceptable on either side of the aisle.
I'd like to follow talking about the money in this race. It has been widely reported that there's been more money spent on this House race than any other in American history, and the bulk of those dollars are not coming from the state of Georgia. Mr. Ossoff, firstly with you, is that wrong, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's a major problem. There's far too much money in politics. There's far too much unaccountable money in politics. One of the things that I'm proud of is that my campaign is funded by small dollar grassroots fundraising. The average contribution to my campaign is less than $50, and that's from folks across the country, but also far more Georgians than have contributed to my opponent's campaign. My opponent's campaign, in stark contrast, has been bailed out by unaccountable Washington super PACs who have been running cynical attack ads here in this state for months. They're often funded anonymously. They're funded in unlimited amounts by the very special interests who are keeping anything from getting done in Washington. That's why we need an independent voice in Washington, not someone like Secretary Handel, whose campaign has been bailed out by these special interests who fund these super PACs in unlimited amounts.
Again, my opponent has a really generous observation when he's misleading folks. Number one, there are super PACs and outside groups funding both of these campaigns. But let's be clear, what's really fueling all the money in this is the fact that my opponent has more donors and more dollars coming from outside of the state of Georgia. They are coming from Nancy Pelosi, California, New York, Massachusetts. He doesn't want the people of Georgia to know that he is a liberal Democrat. He is supported by the most liberal elements of the Democratic Party. I support more transparency when it comes to campaign finance rules, but it is more than disingenuous of my opponent to suggest that somehow he has a higher road on all of this.
May I? Well, here are the facts. Many more Georgians have contributed to my campaign than to Secretary Handel's campaign. The average contribution to my campaign is less than $50. And in stark contrast, Secretary Handel, like so many career politicians in both parties who are mired in gridlock in Washington, has had her campaign bailed out by anonymous Washington super PACs who are spending unprecedented amounts on attack ads here. And Secretary Handel wouldn't be able to even tell us who's funding those super PACs because much of the contributions to them are anonymous.
Again, my opponent is misleading the people of this district. There are super PACs funding you, running television ads that are misleading on my record. You don't know who are funding them. And furthermore, your campaign is being propelled by the most liberal of elements, from Nancy Pelosi to Jane Fonda, Hank Johnson, to donors, a majority of your donors from California, Massachusetts, New York. They are not from this district, and certainly they don't represent the values of this district. In fact, your values are some 3,000 miles away in San Francisco.
So let me ask you all this. If the politics has gotten dirtier, it sounds like, in your view, by a result of outside dollars that you all would contend, it seems like, that sometimes you're not even controlling that message. That's a different topic. But let me ask you this. What would you do specifically, if elected, to end some of this if you think it would be better for the nation instead of just trying to get people elected? And I'll start with you, Ms. Handel.
I think that we need more transparency. I've said that many times, and I would be fully supportive of that, to have more transparency in who the donors are for all of the groups. I also think it's important for any candidate to make sure that he or she is being propelled by the people within the district. And when it comes to PAC dollars, let me just say this. The individuals who contribute to political action committees for business associations, they are businesses in the 6th district that employ tens of thousands of people in this district. So they have a right to engage in this race, to have their interests represented as well.
Mr. Ossoff.
Well, I'm a strong proponent of campaign finance reform to get unchecked, unlimited, anonymous money out of politics. That's why I'm proud of the fact that my campaign is powered by contributions that are on average less than $50. And it's why I respectfully point out again that most of the advertising that's been run on Secretary Handel's behalf has been funded by Washington, D.C. based super PACs who cater to the interests of the special interests in Washington, who are funded in anonymous amounts. In anonymous contributions in unlimited amounts by special interests in Washington. We need an independent voice in Congress, not someone who's going to be accountable to the same old special interests funding these super PACs in unlimited quantities.
We're going to move on, and I just want to say that I think it's fair to say for both candidates there have been sizable amounts of money from outside of the state from PACs. We're going to move on to my colleague, Greg Bluestein.
Hey, this question is for both campaigns. Secretary Handel, can you name an instance where you disagree with President Donald Trump's decisions while he was president? And Mr. Ossoff, can you do the same for President Obama? Secretary Handel first.
Super. I can name several. Certainly, with the president's budget, there are any number of things within the budget that are good. I think it's great that he finally, after 8 years, we have a president who has put forth a budget and one that's going to balance in 10 years. I am troubled by the deep cuts in scientific research and cancer research, and we'll have an eye towards ensuring that we are protecting the breast and cervical cancer early detection screening program and funding for community health centers. Additionally, I think I would really like to recommend some Twitter policy changes.
Any in particular?
Sometimes you should just put down the computer, the phone, and walk away.
Mr. Ossoff, do you have anything on that?
Well, I think that when President Obama laid down a red line in Syria, which was that the Assad regime would face military consequences if it used chemical weapons against civilians, and then backed away from that red line when the U.S. intelligence community found that Assad had done so. It sent a signal that the U.S. would not firmly and resolutely make good on our commitments to international peace and security. And that's why, in fact, I supported this White House in launching swift, limited, punitive strikes in response to Assad's use of chemical weapons against civilians this year. Secretary Handel, in contrast, criticized a Democratic Senate candidate several years ago when she was advocating for the use of force against Assad and applauded the president this time. We need independent leadership that will not make foreign policy decisions on the basis of partisanship, but on the basis of national interest and national security.
First of all, the idea that my opponent is somehow this independent voice when he is being powered by Nancy Pelosi, Hank Johnson, and liberals to the tune of tens of millions of dollars from California, New York, and Massachusetts is completely disingenuous. And yes, I did oppose the strikes in Syria by President Obama. And the reason we had to go and do what we did under President Trump is because President Obama had the line in the sand and then erased it and had such a weak policy. And you cannot let stand global types of incidents like we had in Syria because they go so against the norm. So the president acted appropriately.
Well, if I might, I mean, that raises the question precisely. Why did you oppose the strikes when it was President Obama who was proposing them, but support them when it was President Trump who was proposing them? My argument is that U.S. national security and foreign policy should be above partisanship, that we need a consistent and firm stance when it comes to, for example, the use of chemical weapons against civilians. But Secretary Handel's position is very inconsistent. She opposed the use of force when President Obama proposed it. She supported the use of force when President Trump proposed it. National security should not be about political party. It should be about the interests of the country.
Well, if we're going to have a debate about who's changing their positions, let's talk about the Taylor Force Act and your original unwillingness to support ending aid to Palestinian Authority when they were paying terrorists. When it comes to the situation in Syria, there was opposition to that because President Obama had a feckless, lead from behind foreign policy with no strategy, no end game, no exit game. That's why there was opposition. President Trump came in with a clear strategy of what to do and targeted strikes, and as we move forward, there is a real strategy there.
Richard. Yeah, if we're going to be in the foreign policy arena now, let me ask a question about that. It's a very general question now. We've seen with President Trump some strained relations with Europe to the point where Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel has said the U.S. may be unreliable now and we may have to go on it on our own. What do you believe now is America's role in the world, and do we still want to be the leader of the free world? Are we still the leader of the free world when we're having these strained relations with Europe and other parts of the country? Let me start with Mrs. Handel.
Well, I think, frankly, that the incidents recently in Manchester and London were a real wake-up call for global leaders around the world. It is time for all of our global leaders, the United States included, to unite in a comprehensive front to combat terrorism. We need to make sure that we are working together and doing everything that we possibly can, because it is abundantly clear that what we're doing is not enough. And we need to put all the options on the table so that we can protect the American interests and the interests of Americans on our own soil as well as around the world. And that is going to take a very united effort with every nation paying paying their fair share towards the UN and being a partner in this effort.
Mr. Ossoff?
Well, I think at this time in particular, the U.S. needs to redouble its commitments to our NATO partners, needs to redouble its commitment to international leadership on environmental policy to fight climate change, needs to stand strong against Russian aggression and Russian interference around the world. And I'm somewhat dismayed by the weak trajectory of U.S. foreign policy today. We have an administration that has failed to commit to uphold Article 5 in the NATO treaty, that has pulled out of the Paris Accord, relinquishing U.S. global leadership in the fight against climate change, and which hasn't shown the kind of firm response to what the U.S. intelligence community has clearly stated was Russian interference in the U.S. election. We need an independent voice in Congress to hold both parties accountable, to stand up for the U.S. national interest, no matter who's in charge, and to stand with our allies in defense of our security.
Respectfully, dealing with foreign policy, I'm going to put each of you on the spot because, as you know, when the stakes are as high as they could possibly be, action is typically called for. So here's the question when it comes to Iran. Mr. Ossoff, I'll start with you. Would you vote for or against a war with Iran if U.S. intel revealed Iran was on the cusp of having a weaponized nuclear weapon?
Well, here's my view on Iran. First of all, Iran has made some commitments to restrict uranium enrichment. And we need to hold Iran accountable to those commitments. We need to make sure there is strict and uncompromising monitoring of their commitments to restrict uranium enrichment. We need to make sure that sanctions snap back in the event that the intelligence community or the International Atomic Energy Agency find that Iran has violated its commitments to avoid restricting uranium. And furthermore, we need to impose further sanctions if Iran violates UN Security Council resolutions that prohibit the testing of ballistic missiles. And in the event that the imposition of further sanctions, should Iran violate the agreement, which the Office of the Director of National Intelligence and Senator Bob Corker, a Republican from Tennessee, have said that Iran has not yet, then no option should be off the table in ensuring that Iran does not gain a nuclear weapons capability and threaten us and our ally Israel.
So it sounds like you're saying after a lot of checking and double checking, so let me try again. If the intel came in and Congress were asked to vote yes or no for war against Iran, if the intel said that they had a weaponized nuclear program, would you vote in favor of that or not?
Well, I believe that when we're talking about something like the use of military force, Justin, with all due respect, there are complexities involved that a hypothetical cannot fully encompass. What I will say is that if Iran poses an imminent threat to Israel, to the United States, to any of our allies, then we should use force to prevent them from striking our allies. And as we seek to ensure that Iran does not develop a nuclear weapons capability, if economic policy, diplomatic policy are unsuccessful in dissuading them from developing a nuclear weapon, then we should be prepared to use force if necessary.
Ms. Handel, on Iran?
Thank you. First of all, I find it interesting because my opponent has been in support of the Iran deal, and it is a fact that Iran has broken the parameters of that agreement. Furthermore, under President Obama, some nearly $2 billion in cash was flown over to Iran, money that the Obama administration has admitted is being used for terrorists and to support further activities there. What I will say is this. We need to have the strongest policy forward on Iran. And indeed, it is not appropriate, Justin, I don't think, because of the complexities of this, to speculate about whether or not there would be war or not war. But it is a fact that Iran is stockpiling the necessary ingredients to nuclearize. We must stop that and engage our allies. And indeed, they are one of the biggest threats to our ally, Israel. And you know, it's just interesting to me that my opponent is being supported by several organizations that endorsed him specifically because he was going to be in support of the Iran deal.
Candace?
I'd like to take us back to a domestic policy question. And I think I want to talk about health care. The bill that's been approved by the House has been reviewed now by the Congressional Budget Office, and instead of 24 million Americans being left without health care over the next 10 years, it would be 23 million Americans. Should the residents and the voters in the 6th District, older ones especially, because this proposal would cause older people who tend to get sick and go to the doctor to pay more, whereas younger people who don't get sick and don't go to the doctor would be pulled out of the system and would pay less. How do you sell the GOP healthcare plan to the voters in the 6th. I'll start with you, Secretary Handel, and then Mr. Ossoff, I'd like your feedback on that question as well.
Thank you. The system we're under now, under Obamacare, is collapsing. And I know, because my husband and I get our insurance on the exchange. The premiums are skyrocketing, and we are seeing a complete collapse in choice of plans as well as physicians. Steve and I have seen our monthly premium go from about $350 a month to nearly $1,200 a month. Our deductible from $2,500 to $10,000. So the status quo is unacceptable. And I reject the premise of the CBO. What it's saying is it is a projection and it is assuming that not a single person is going to take advantage of the tax credits that are within the bill making its way through the Senate. And I can tell you they were wrong about the assumptions for Obamacare, and they're wrong for this. Those tax credits are going to encourage people to have plans. It's going to help create more choice when we put get the federal government out of the way, because at the end of the day, the goal is to provide options for individuals to buy plans and to be able to preserve that relationship between a physician and the patient.
Mr. Ossoff.
Well, I met a little boy about a month ago named Matt, who came out to canvass with the campaign, knock on some doors. He's 7 years old, came out with his family, and he was born with a heart condition, a pre-existing condition. And he's able to get coverage right now because there are protections for children like that with pre-existing conditions. But Secretary Handel supports a bill that would gut the protections for Americans with pre-existing conditions, hundreds of thousands of them here in Georgia. Secretary Handel sees fit to impose her own views on Georgians' health care decisions. And this is a consistent pattern in Secretary Handel's career. She saw fit to impose her own views on health care decisions of Georgians when she was an executive at the Susan G. Komen Foundation, a charity committed to fighting breast cancer, when she imposed her own views and cut off funding for breast cancer screenings at Planned Parenthood. And I think the question that I have, and that many voters in the 6th District have, is why Secretary Handel thought it was reasonable when she took a job at an organization dedicated to fighting breast cancer to impose her own views and cut off funding for life-saving breast cancer screenings at Planned Parenthood.
If I might. And I'm going to answer both of them with all due respect. Number one, John, my sister has a pre-existing condition. She was born without an esophagus. And for you to suggest that I would do anything that would negatively affect her is absolutely outrageous and unacceptable. The facts are, ladies and gentlemen, that the bill in the Senate right now, it provides more protections for individuals with pre-existing conditions. No, you would not be able to be rejected from a plan. If you have a plan on the Obamacare exchange or another plan, you cannot be charged more, nor can you be told that you can't have a plan because of your pre-existing condition. And in regards to Komen, for anyone to think that as one individual employee, I was able to wave a magic wand and make something like that happen. It was a business decision ultimately decided by the board of Komen. And I have been working on women's health issues for nearly my entire life. I worked for Marilyn Quayle, coordinating her breast cancer activities, helping to get October established as Breast Cancer Awareness Month, helping to get the first Office of Women's Health established at the NIH. At Komen, I was instrumental in protecting the funding at the state level and the federal level for the breast and cervical cancer screening program. And on top of that, I have held the hand of friends who have fought breast cancer and other types of women's reproductive cancers. And I will not be lectured by you or anyone else.
Well, if I might, and with all due respect, Secretary Handel, first of all, when it comes to pre-existing conditions, I'm afraid that you're mistaken. The bill that passed the House guts protections for pre-existing conditions for Georgians. And to follow up, again, with all due respect, Secretary Handel, with respect to the Komen Foundation, in 2012, you were discussing how you led the effort to defund breast cancer screenings at Planned Parenthood. You were campaigning on your centrality in the decision to defund breast cancer screenings at Planned Parenthood. Indeed, it was reported in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution within the last week that you engineered the decision to defund breast cancer screenings at Planned Parenthood. So some clarity with respect to your role in the matter, whether you were telling the truth when you were campaigning on your role in this decision several years ago, or telling the truth now as you avoid responsibility for it might be helpful for the voters.
John, I had a job to do at the Komen Foundation, and I was directed to come up with options for how the organization could disengage. But all of that is irrelevant in the fact that you have continued to mislead the people of this district with deceptive ads that have been marked and checked independently as being false and misleading. The ultimate decision was by the board, and for you to once again, like liberals always do, hijack women's issues and make them a political wedge issue is unacceptable.
I'm sorry, Justin, and with all due respect to Secretary Handel, it's a straightforward question. You either led the decision to defund breast cancer screenings at Planned Parenthood when you were at Komen. You were either central to the decision, as you claimed several years ago, and either engineered the decision, as the Atlanta Journal-Constitution recently reported, or you didn't. Which is it?
You can't believe everything you read in the press. Everyone knows that. Again, my role was to come up with options and present them to the boards. At the end of the day, I did not singularly impose anything. And the point here, again, is having an individual who has been misleading the voters of this district time and time again, and here he goes again.
So then to go forward, to let the record show, Ms. Handel, what is it specifically that you do or do not support when it comes to screenings, pre-existing conditions?
My opponent is just inaccurate about that. If you read the bill, it says specifically that if you have a pre-existing condition, you cannot be rejected from a plan. Number two, if you have insurance currently with a plan or currently within a plan from the exchange, you also cannot be rejected and you cannot be charged more. That is what the bill says.
Matt, I think it's important that the voters understand the legislation. It's fine to say that someone can get a plan if they have a pre-existing condition. If they can't afford the plan, that's a useless protection. The protection that's currently in law prohibits price discrimination against people with pre-existing conditions, like Matt, that little boy, 7 years old, with a heart condition. Without that kind of protection, his family may not be able to afford insurance. If they can't afford insurance, then they could pay tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars out of pocket per year to keep their little boy alive. The bill that Secretary Handel supports guts protections for Americans with pre-existing conditions. The voters need to understand that and understand that Secretary Handel sees fit to impose her own views on Georgians' health care choices by supporting this bill.
It is clear that this is going to work its way through Congress and that the two of you interpret it differently. Greg.
Yeah, let's take this next question a little local. For residents of the 6th District, one of the most stubborn problems we face is transportation mobility, and the I-85 bridge collapse only highlighted that. I'd like to ask both of you what you would do to increase mobility, and would you support transit if the voters in this district demanded it? Mr. Ossoff, you go first.
Well, growing up in Metro Atlanta, I feel like I spent about half of my life sitting in traffic on 400, and it's only gotten worse. And I think with the bridge collapse on 85, we know now more than ever that we need renewal of our infrastructure. And I will work with anyone to deliver the kind of infrastructure renewal that Georgia so urgently needs if we're going to attract jobs and investment to this community, growing organizations that are thinking about placing new research centers, headquarters and facilities here will demand cutting-edge infrastructure so they can move goods and services efficiently around the area. Young people getting degrees in science, technology, engineering, and math, preparing for the high-tech economy, demand that kind of mobility for quality of life. But if we're going to achieve that kind of thing, Greg, in Congress, we need some independent leadership that can work across the aisle. And I've said clearly, I'm ready to work with the White House on an infrastructure package. But if we send another career politician, another career partisan politician to Washington, like Secretary Handel, I'm afraid we're going to get more of the same, more gridlock, more dysfunction, and not the kind of results that Georgia needs when it comes to renewal of our infrastructure.
Thank you. It is clear that we have left our infrastructure unattended and allowed there to be decay. What we saw, however, that was a positive was that when jurisdictions work together, when we get the federal government out of the way, we can do really good things. And when we engage the private sector, getting that I-85 bridge done as quickly as it was a real example of what we can do. And rolling back the regulatory impositions there really went a long way in injecting the private sector. What I will say is this: we need to work diligently as the tax reform bill comes through and how we can structure the infrastructure payment system. But to think that a hand-picked candidate from Nancy Pelosi is going to do anything other than go along to get along with the liberal left, that's laughable.
And we are going to pick this up. A quick break now. We will pick this up, and we're going to talk about taxes. So keep it here. A lot more to cover tonight. After this short break, the candidates will also be asking each other a question.
At Channel 2 Action News, we have the tools, the technology, and most importantly, the people to cover the moments happening now. We are Atlanta's biggest news team. People who know the community with decades of experience building connections and sources. People who dig, investigate, and get all the answers for you. It's why we cover local news like no other Atlanta news team. I'm Javita Moore. Join me and the people of Channel 2 Action News every day. Coverage you can count on.
Channel 2's Family to Family has been proudly serving the community for 30 years, raising awareness, giving hope. 3 decades of making a difference in your community. 58,000 stuffed backpacks for school kids. $41 million raised for life-saving research. Nearly 240,000 shoeboxes filled to help the homeless. Putting a spotlight on important family issues. Family to Family. 30 years of community coverage you can count on.
I'm Justin Farmer. At Channel 2 Action News, we bring you straight into the moments happening now. Closer with News Chopper 2's HD camera and a fleet of drones. And we can see inside storms with 3D technology and the South's most powerful weather radar, Storm Tracker 2 HD. We bring you closer to local stories with details and video you can't get anywhere else. We invite you to join us. Channel 2 Action News, every day, 4, 5, and 6. Coverage you can count on.
And we welcome you back to our live debate tonight here at WSB-TV. The Georgia 6th is in play, and it's not just for Georgians, it's on the national stage. We welcome you on Channel 2 and also at WSB-TV.com. Now, this is the first and only live primetime debate for the runoff between Karen Handel and Jon Ossoff, and they're with us live tonight. So let's continue our questions, and let's pick up on the topic of taxes. And just today, it was the president talking more about his plan. He is saying that this is his primary focus after security now. Democrats are saying that the president's plan would add to our national debt, taking it past $20 trillion, where it is today. Republicans say it would create jobs and grow our economy at record levels. So starting with you, Mr. Ossoff, would you support the president's tax plan? And if not, why?
Well, we don't know enough yet about its impact on the deficits or growth. When I speak with entrepreneurs and small business owners across the 6th District, I've gotten to know one in particular named Scott Saturday, who runs a data science firm near Alpharetta. They tell me what I know as well as a small business owner, which is that they need certainty, simplicity, and efficiency. And I'll work with anyone in Washington to deliver that kind of results for communities here in Georgia, for businesses here in Georgia, as well as to try to achieve a reduction in corporate income tax rates for small and medium-sized businesses by eliminating loopholes in the tax code. But Secretary Handel supports what isn't even a bill yet, what is a tax reform proposal from the White House that has not been assessed by independent economists to understand its impact on growth, has not been assessed by independent economists to understand its impact on the deficit. And that's the very definition of a rubber stamp. We need independent leadership that will wait to understand precisely what the impact of tax reform legislation will be on businesses and families here. I'll look at the bill on the merits, and if it will deliver the kinds of solutions businesses and families here need, I'll support it.
Thank you. You know, as Fulton County Commission Chairman, I was able to see firsthand the specific results of not raising taxes and making sure that people's tax rates stayed the same. When it comes to this federal tax cut bill, we need, and this has been a debate for a long time, and it is time for Congress to act. We need comprehensive tax reform. We are at the highest corporate tax rate in the world, and it's not enough, however, to just do corporate rates, bringing those down. We have to have individual relief as well, so the middle class can engage and participate in the tax relief. And it is equally important as someone, and I know this because I ran a Chamber of Commerce, and I know that the vast majority of businesses are organized as pass-through organizations, S-corps and LLCs. If we don't have individual relief as well, we won't be able to see that large percentage of businesses be able to participate. As we lower taxes, we will jumpstart this economy in a way that we have not seen in decades. And when we do that, we will be able to see our anemic growth, which currently sits at about 1.5%, get up into the 3 and 4% range, which will generate the revenues that we need to make smart, sound decisions with the budget.
Time now, please, for the candidates to ask one another a question. And each candidate will get a single question tonight, a 1-minute response, rebuttals at 30 seconds. We determined tonight's order for this by drawing, and Jon Ossoff, you have the first question.
Thank you, Justin. Secretary Handel, we touched on this a bit earlier, and I want to come back and understand your track record a little bit better. When you took the job at the Susan G. Komen Foundation, an organization committed to the fight against breast cancer, and you knew that Planned Parenthood breast cancer screenings were a key partnership for that foundation. As I understand it, you nevertheless went in and you led an effort to defund life-saving breast cancer screenings at Planned Parenthood. And as has been reported, this cost the Komen Foundation tens of millions of dollars or more in lost revenues after you resigned amidst the scandal, because folks had lost faith in the organization while you were leading it. I suppose my question is, and again the question so many voters in the 6th District have is, if you were committed to going in and defunding breast cancer screenings at Planned Parenthood, why did you take the job in the first place?
First of all, John, I was one of hundreds of employees at the Komen Foundation. Secondly, I was tasked by the CEO and chairman of the board to develop options for how the organization could disengage from Planned Parenthood. Why? Because the grants were not effective. And it has been debunked over and over again, and it doesn't matter how many times you say it. It does not make it true. Planned Parenthood does not do mammograms, period, end of paragraph. And when it comes to women's health, I have worked on this issue for virtually my entire career, working in the White House under Marilyn Quayle, coordinating breast cancer awareness activities to help get Breast Cancer Awareness Month established in the month of October, to help at Komen preserve and protect the funding at the state level and the federal level for that critical breast and cervical cancer screening initiative. So I'm going to be, and far better than someone like my opponent, I'm going to be the front line of fighting for women, because I have been there and I have held the hands of women who have been fighting for their lives with breast cancer and other cancer. I am not going to be lectured by you, John.
Ms. Handel, your opportunity for a question from Mr. Ossoff.
Thank you. Thank you. So, John, I guess what I would like to know is exactly who are you going to vote for in this election?
Is that the question? Okay. Well, I think Secretary Handel is referring to my residence, which is a matter that I've addressed transparently throughout this campaign. I grew up in the 6th Congressional District. I was born and raised in Georgia, unlike Secretary Handel, who was born and raised in Washington, D.C. I live across from Emory University to support my fiancée while she finishes medical school. I'm proud to be supporting her career, even if I take a little bit of political heat for it. Secretary Handel, born and raised in Washington, D.C., seems to have spent much of her career determined to return. And it's typical of a career politician, I think, to focus on something like this rather than the matters of concern to the people of the 6th District. How are we going to attract more jobs and investment to this community? How are we going to make sure that young people who are getting educations for the jobs of the future in our tech sector are able to succeed and apply their talents here at home? These are the questions of concern to the voters of the 6th District.
Actually, it is of concern to the people of the 6th District that you do not live in our community. And while I was born in Washington, D.C., I didn't get to pick where I was born. But the fact is, I've been in Georgia for almost as long as you've even been alive. You might live just 5 minutes outside of the district, but your values are nearly 3,000 miles away in San Francisco. And that's why so many of your contributions have come from liberals of California, New York, and Massachusetts. It's why you're supported by Nancy Pelosi. And folks, it matters. It's no wonder that my opponent didn't want to do the Atlanta Press Club debate. It was going to be aired on CNN, where all folks from around the country, all of his liberal supporters were going to see it, and the fake Jon Ossoff was going to collide with the real Jon Ossoff, who is a Nancy Pelosi-backed liberal.
Well, I'd be happy to respond. One of the things that I learned growing up in this community is that folks are concerned with real issues that affect them: healthcare, education. jobs here in this community. And Secretary Handel has a lot of partisan attacks that she's launching, but she hasn't provided any explanation for how she's going to serve the people of this community. She's a career politician who's dead set on imposing her own views on this community, whether it's gutting protections for people who need protection from price increases if they have pre-existing conditions, whether it's defunding life-saving breast cancer screenings at Planned Parenthood, whether it's endorsing a tax reform proposal before we even know what its impact on deficits and growth would be. What we need is an independent voice, substantively focused on the issues of concern to this community, not another career politician who's run 6 times for 5 different offices.
Ms. Handel, 30 seconds.
Thank you. Well, he got a lot more than that, so I'll take about the same time as he did, if you don't mind. My record is one of results in the private sector and in public service. As chairman of the Fulton County Board of Commissioners, I was able to balance a budget without tax increases. And John, I did that without a Republican majority working with Democrats. As CEO of the North Fulton Chamber of Commerce, I helped create tens of thousands of jobs with the Economic Development Program. My opponent here, he just talks about it. He talks about cutting spending. I've actually done it, reducing the budget in the Secretary of State's office by nearly 20%. What we need is someone who knows how to get the job done, someone with real experience. What we don't need is a career staffer who was a junior staffer for Hank Johnson.
Our next question from Richard Elliott, please.
I'd like to probably bring it down a little more local now. Let's talk about religious freedom laws. We've seen efforts at the state level. We've seen efforts at the federal level. What is your stance on these so-called religious freedom laws, which some groups, particularly the LGBTQ community, believe gives groups, businesses, and organizations the ability to discriminate against them? We'll start with you, Mr. Ossoff.
Well, I oppose any legislation that permits discrimination against people on the basis of sexual orientation, on the basis of race or faith or national origin. I think we need to redouble our commitment to the civil rights of all Americans, and I would hope that Secretary Handel would join me in making that commitment.
Mrs. Handel.
I also oppose legislation that would infringe on individuals' religious freedoms. We need to have strong support for the First Amendment, while at the same time recognizing that we also don't want to discriminate based on someone's sexual orientation.
We promised that we would go to a couple of viewer questions tonight, so we want to take this one. This one comes to us on Facebook, and it comes from a viewer for both candidates, please. And the question is, does either candidate support a minimum wage increase? Mr. Ossoff, starts with you.
Yes, I do. The minimum wage should be a living wage. I think we can raise it indexed to the cost of living, because the cost of living varies widely in urban and rural areas and in different states across this country. I think that increase needs to be implemented at a pace that allows business owners to adapt their business plans so they're not shocked, their business plans are not shocked by a sudden increase in labor costs. But look, if someone's working a 40-hour work week, they deserve the kind of standard of living that Americans expect. That's part of the American dream, and there are too many folks who are having trouble making ends meet.
Minimum wage.
This is an example of the fundamental difference between a liberal and a conservative. I do not support a livable wage. What I support is making sure that we have an economy that is robust with low taxes and less regulation, so that those small businesses that would be dramatically hurt if you impose higher minimum wages on them are able to do what they do best: grow jobs and create good paying jobs for people in the 6th District.
Next question from Candace Presley.
Both parties talk about a need for bipartisanship. Mrs. Handel, I'll start with you. Which member of the Georgia congressional delegation from the other party would you want to work with in Washington to get something done, and why? And then I'll follow with the same question for Mr. Ossoff.
Thank you. It's not about which one individual person. It is about looking at the policy and coming up with sound conservative policies that will be in the best interest of the 6th District. I'm going to work hard for the people of the 6th so that we can lower taxes, have less regulation, make sure we finally repeal and replace Obamacare, and get a real fix, real solutions to address our transportation issues.
So you're not willing to reach across the aisle in an effort to get something done?
No, I didn't say that. I said it's not about any particular issue. We need to all work together, and I have a record of actually doing that. As Fulton County Commission Chairman, most of the people know I did not have a Republican majority in that role. It was 4 Democrats to 3 Republicans. And so I had to get very good at working across the aisle, making sure that I could find that sweet spot of how could we move good policy forward. And I did it time and time again, balancing the budget without a tax increase, getting some of the most strict ethics legislation in the state of Georgia passed for Fulton County, time and time again.
Mr. Ossoff.
I hope to work with every Republican in the Georgia delegation. I would point out Senator Isaacson, who has a reputation, a long track record of working across the aisle to get things done. Georgia has a long history of sending congressional representatives to Congress who are willing to work across the aisle to get things done, but we've lost a little bit of that. We've lost a little bit of that nationally. Congress is full of career politicians who are mired in gridlock, who do nothing but fight amongst themselves, who pursue partisan objectives rather than the public interest. I will be an independent voice for this community. I will work with anyone to serve the best interests of this community. But if we elect Secretary Handel, with all due respect, Madam Secretary, we will get another career politician who has spent much of her career seeking elected office, who is partisan, and who won't work across the aisle to get the job done.
So I want to ask you all this. You have heard from your constituents. I know you both have heard this, and you have both said you'll reach across the aisle. Americans are clamoring to end the gridlock. And so you'll say, and you have said, both of you, that you have worked with others and you will from the different party. But here's the question. Is there a topic or a position that you hold for which you would not negotiate because it is that meaningful for you, and it's just crystal clear? Ms. Handel.
Raising taxes.
Mr. Ossoff.
Well, voting rights. I am concerned by the apparent inclination of the Justice Department under Attorney General Sessions to back away from strict enforcement of civil rights and voting rights legislation. I will stand up for the right of every Georgian to exercise their right to make their voice heard at the polls. I will conduct aggressive congressional oversight to ensure that federal agencies are enforcing the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act.
Do we have time? We have time for another question. Greg?
Mr. Ossoff, your campaign once advertised you as someone who would, quote, make Trump furious. Do you think a victory would do that? And do you see yourself as part of the resistance summer that national Democrats are now touting?
Well, I don't think that I will get a congratulatory tweet from the president if I win. But I hope to have the opportunity to work with the president to get things done for Georgia. I mentioned infrastructure. If the White House puts forward an infrastructure package that is fiscally responsible, that can deliver the kinds of results that we all know Georgia needs to grow our local economy, I'll be interested in working with the White House. But by the same token, I will stand up to anyone, regardless of their party, if I believe that they're putting forward proposals that are not consistent with our interests or not consistent with our values. With so much disarray and gridlock in Washington right now, I think now more than ever we need a fresh perspective. Now more than ever we need an independent-minded voice and not another career politician.
I hardly think that someone who is giving a closed-door speech at the Resistance Summer is anything but a product of the resistance movement and a liberal who is going to do the bidding of Nancy Pelosi.
I'm going to give you, please, just 30 seconds to answer the following question, and then we're going to get to closing remarks. Two different parties, both Georgians. We're confident you would both fight for Georgia. So here's the thing. As it relates to doing your work for Georgia, what would be, in your view, the most important thing to keep Georgia's economy strong or stronger if you're elected? Ms. Handel.
Thank you. The most important thing for us to do for Georgia's economy is, one, first and foremost, repeal and replace Obamacare. It's the largest tax increase, certainly in my lifetime. Get comprehensive tax reform done so that we can draw down corporate rates and individual rates and continue the aggressive assault on rolling back the onerous regulatory climate that is crushing jobs, not only in the 6th District, but across the state and around this nation.
Mr. Ossoff.
The most important thing we can do is to attack waste in the federal budget so that we can make tough choices and set the right priorities. I have identified nearly $600 billion in specific savings and cuts over the next 10 years, $16 billion immediately in cuts to programs that have been found to be duplicative or improperly paid for by nonpartisan agencies like the GAO and the CBO. If we attack that waste, we can set the right priorities: high-tech research, higher education, infrastructure, and deficit reduction, and grow our local economy.
When you talk about cutting, if I may follow on, when you all talk about cutting, Is there any concern that when you say $16 billion, when you look at a deficit that's of $22 trillion, a debt of $22 trillion, that percentage-wise, would there be other places to find money?
Well, I've identified $600 billion in specific savings and cuts over a 10-year time horizon. Obviously, federal waste, federal spending is out of control, and that's been a bipartisan effort. Both parties in Congress waste too much tax money.
Excellent.
It's going to take bipartisan efforts to attack the waste and set the right priorities.
Thank you. It is now time for our closing remarks. Each candidate will have a full minute. We determine order by drawing, and first, Mr. Ossoff.
Well, let me just say, first of all, thank you, Justin, for moderating. Thanks to our panel. Thanks to WSB Television and the AARP for hosting the live stream. I grew up in this community, and I have seen our economy grow over the last 30 years. But I believe that our potential is unlimited. I think that we need some imagination. I think we need some willingness to work across the aisle. I think we need a fresh perspective. But we've got the busiest airport in the world. We're just up the road from a deep water port in Savannah. Metro Atlanta can become one of the world's great commercial capitals. And if it does, standards of living and opportunity will increase, will attract more capital and clients for our businesses. Our young people will have more opportunity. I will be a fresh, independent voice for this community, putting its best interests first. And I'd be honored and humbled to represent the 6th District in Congress.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this opportunity. In this election, the voters have a very clear choice: the real Karen Handel or the fake Jon Ossoff. You know my record. You know that I have gotten the job done. While my opponent talks, I have actually done it. I've cut spending. I've balanced budgets without tax increases. I've created jobs. That's the kind of experience that I'm going to take to Congress, to represent you, to fight for you. I am going to be a fierce advocate for you, someone who is going to fight for lower taxes, fight to fix our transportation problems, fight for a balanced budget. You know, my opponent, he's been misleading us all along in this election. He's a junior staffer who inflated his resume. He rarely mentions the fact that he's a Democrat. His campaign is powered, you've heard him say it, by Nancy Pelosi and liberals from California, New York, and Massachusetts. He says he lives 5 minutes outside of the district. Well, that's fine, but his values, they are 3,000 miles away. This decision is simple: someone you know, someone you trust, or Jon Ossoff, who will be another vote for Nancy Pelosi. Thank you for this opportunity. I asked for your vote, but now I'm going to work hard to earn it. Thank you.
To both of you and your campaigns, we appreciate you being here tonight and putting yourselves front and center for citizens. Our extensive coverage of this 6th District debate continues in just moments at WSB-TV.com and on our Facebook page. And a live look at the Studio C now, where WSB-TV, my colleague Javita Moore is preparing in-depth analysis of tonight's debate with some of the top political minds in our state. And we'll have a live poll on who you believe did the best tonight in this debate. Who won? I'll be joining Javita in just a few moments here, so we invite you to go to WSB-TV.com right now for more coverage. And a reminder, Election Day, 2 weeks from today. It is Tuesday the 20th. We will bring you up-to-the-minute results and extensive live coverage here on Channel 2 Action News and online. Thank you to our candidates once again. Thank you to our panel, and a special thanks to you at home for watching and being involved in the political process. I'm Justin Farmer. Have a wonderful evening. Our extended coverage now at WSB-TV.com.
I'm tracking drier air behind this front. I'll show you when sunshine returns at 11.
I'm Karen Handel, and I approve this message.
As an Army
Nationally watched 6th District debate one-on-one for the first time live right here on Channel 2. Now we are here with a team of experts, analysts, and strategists to break down key moments and how the debate shapes this critical race moving forward. So first, let's get right to some of the highlights from tonight.
My opponent has a really generous observation when he's misleading folks.
Here are the facts. Many more Georgians have contributed to my campaign than to Secretary Handel's campaign.
He is a liberal Democrat.
Secretary Handel, like so many career politicians in both parties who are mired in gridlock in Washington, has had her campaign bailed out by anonymous Washington super PACs.
Your values are some 3,000 miles away in San Francisco.
We need an independent voice in Congress, not someone who's going to be accountable to the same old special interests funding these super PACs.
My opponent is being supported by several organizations that endorsed him specifically because he was going to be in support of the Iran deal.
Secretary Handel supports a bill that would gut the protections for Americans with pre-existing conditions.
For you to suggest that I would do anything that would negatively affect her is absolutely outrageous.
You either engineered the decision, as the Atlanta Journal-Constitution recently reported, or you didn't.
He is being powered by Nancy Pelosi, Hank Johnson, and liberals.
Secretary Handel's position is very inconsistent.
So we are now going to dive deeper into some of those exchanges. Joining me tonight to break it all down, Channel 2's political analyst Bill Crane, who served in senior communication roles for 2 U.S. senators and a governor. Republican strategist Brian Robinson, he is former communications director for Governor Nathan Deal. Democratic strategist Theron Johnson, who was the Southern Regional Director for President Obama's 2012 campaign, and he also served as senior advisor to Atlanta's Mayor Kasim Reed. Channel 2's Justin Farmer, who just moderated the debate, will also join us in just a little bit. He is going to have insight from our pollster, Mark Roundtree of Landmark Communications, along with Andra Gillespie. She is Associate Professor of Emory University's Department of Political Science. So now, fellas, let's dive right in, beginning with, I'll start with you, Bill. What did each candidate need to accomplish tonight? Did they pull it off?
I thought Jon Ossoff needed to be the Jon Ossoff of his TV commercials, very even-tempered in tone and not really go after Karen Handel in a harder personal way. And he did that. Of the two, though I think if you were to poll what they actually said, voters in the 6th District would like better what Karen Handel said, the way the message was delivered and the way it came across on television. I thought Jon Ossoff had the stronger performance, and oftentimes it's how it's received versus what you actually say.
And he needed to do that.
He did need to do that. I thought for Karen Handel, she should have given us more of her track record because she's got a pretty successful track record. Fulton County CEO, Secretary of State, brought voter ID to Georgia. Even at the Susan Komen Foundation in her private sector job, she has accomplishments compared to someone who's 30 years old, was briefly a congressional staffer, and is now a film documentarian. I don't think she quite accomplished that.
I disagree with Bill on that. And let me, I don't think that concentrating on what she did in office before was the right message for her tonight because it makes her look like a career politician in an outsider environment. What she did was talk about the differences between the two in the race because this is at heart a Republican district and he's gotten away with pretending to be a moderate. Her purpose tonight was to say he's not a moderate, he's not who he says he is, and she got that message across.
What about he is a fake that clearly did come across in terms of her messaging. I would agree on that.
That she was trying to get across that he's the fake.
That he's the
Jon
fake
Ossoff.
and I'm the real Karen Handel.
He's not a moderate, he's a liberal.
Okay.
But
Theron.
if I can jump in here and say, look, I disagree with Bill and I agree with Brian. I think that what you saw from Jon Ossoff tonight was a candidate who was extremely prepared. When it got into specifics, what would you do in Congress? What is your plan, particularly around the issue of jobs? I mean, he was very specific and very particular about what he said. Now, I think the other thing that really separated these two candidates is that I was really impressed with his ability to really go in depth around foreign affairs. What she said is, I'll just support this president and I'll just wait and see what happens. I mean, his experience where Bill tries to discredit it, where he's a film producer or not, the guy did work on the Hill. He did work on national security issues.
How am I discrediting him saying that he's a film documentarian, which is what he does for a living?
But it is. But I think that you also have to give credit to him that he surprised you like he impressed a lot of voters. That he was able to go in depth about the foreign policy experience tonight. The other thing that I think was just mind-blowing to me, and which is blowing up all over Twitter right now, and everyone is going to be talking about as soon as we get off the air tonight, is her clear gaffe when it comes to the question around a livable wage. And she said specifically she does not support a livable wage. And that's what Jon Ossoff tried to point out tonight, is that you got someone who's lived in the past, and Karen Handel, and he's a candidate for the future that does support a livable wage, and it shows how in tune he is with the people in the system.
And Brian, you're shaking your head because you think that she just misspoke. You think she
used a phrase or language.
Livable wage instead of minimum wage.
She used liberal messaging for a bad idea.
That's not liberal messaging.
It is liberal messaging. Livable wage, what it is bankrupting small business wage.
That's not what it is.
Killing jobs wage. We will have robots and we will have kiosks everywhere if we go to this. What she is saying is, let's not kill jobs. Let's make sure the entry-level jobs are available. And this issue is not important in the 6th district.
But it shows
this
how
is one of the wealthiest districts in the country.
No, it's wealthy where you live. It's not wealthy the whole entire 6th district because you live in a neighborhood with 3-car garages, and most of the people do not live in that area.
But what about
it is an affluent district. Sandy Springs, Dunwoody, even most of Brookhaven, Chandler. I'm not saying it doesn't matter.
Let's be fair on the show, okay? Let's just talk about the district, all right? It's a change.
I love when you disagree there and you throw fairness in. We're not being unfair.
No, we're not. Let's point out the facts about the district, okay? It's a place where Sandy Springs, where you have a progressive mayor who is talking about transit, which is
Rusty Paul. Mayor Paul?
You're
progressive.
No, he's talking about expanding. He's talking about expanding transit. Is that not?
Yes,
he's
that's
a former state Republican Party chair.
Before you laugh at me,
no,
understand
that he is supporting transit.
Okay, but let me talk about the district because I spend a little time up there. All right,
me too.
And then there's millennials there. There are people who refuse to live in the city of Atlanta, but who are supporting transit. There are people who are actually attracted to what Jon Ossoff is saying. Let's look at other ways of how we're going to expand.
Well, clearly, Theron, he
is responding to polling in some way. Yes, he is.
But my point is this: if this was such an affluent Republican stronghold district, right? Then how is it that all of you and myself, we're continuously talking about polling numbers that shows that Jon Ossoff is not only winning Democrats in the district, he's also doing extremely well with disaffected Republicans.
It wasn't touched on much in the debate,
correct?
But there's these two words, President Trump, that are breaking away huge numbers of Republican women voters, not necessarily disaffected with Karen Handel, but disaffected or disappointed by this presidency. And they're holding Karen Handel's candidacy accountable.
This is a nationalized race.
Yeah, but I think the mistake to that point, Bill, is that you cannot be an advocate and a champion for women and support Donald Trump. Like, the two don't mix. This president has been the biggest person who to try to negatively impact the livelihood of women.
Let's listen to another soundbite from the debate.
Obamacare is collapsing, and I know because my husband and I get our insurance on the exchange. The premiums are skyrocketing, and we are seeing a complete collapse in choice of plans as well as physicians. Steve and I have seen our monthly premium go from about $350 a month to nearly $1,200 a month, our deductible from $2,500 to $10,000. So the status quo is unacceptable, and I reject the premise of the CBO. What it's saying is it is a projection and it is assuming that not a single person is going to take advantage of the tax credits that are within the bill making its way through the Senate. And I can tell you they were wrong about the assumptions for Obamacare, and they're wrong for this. Those tax credits are going to encourage people to have plans. It's going to help create more choice when we put get the federal government out of the way, because at the end of the day, the goal is to provide options for individuals to buy plans and to be able to preserve that relationship between a physician and the patient.
Secretary Handel supports a bill that would gut the protections for Americans with pre-existing conditions, hundreds of thousands of them here in Georgia. Secretary Handel sees fit to impose her own views on Georgians' health care decisions. And this is a consistent pattern in Secretary Handel's career. She saw fit to impose her own views on health care decisions of Georgians when she was an executive at the Susan G. Komen Foundation, a charity committed to fighting breast cancer, when she imposed her own views and cut off funding for breast cancer screenings at Planned Parenthood. And I think the question that I have, and that many voters in the 6th District have, is why Secretary Handel thought it was reasonable when she took a job at an organization dedicated to fighting breast cancer to impose her own views and cut off funding for life-saving breast cancer screenings at Planned Parenthood.
So that was one of the exchanges about health care issues. What do you think about what both candidates had to say? I mean, and they disagreed time and time again. Every time they repeated it, they disagreed, and it seemed like they are also interpreting the Affordable Care Act.
Well, neither one of them voted on the actual bill. Both of them have read it. But there's easier. I mean, they were talking about, in his case, a small 7-year-old boy who in Georgia would be covered by Peach Care. So he wouldn't be impacted either way, because there's a state Medicare program that would take care of his pre-existing medical condition. The bill's in the Senate now. What came out of the House is not going to pass as is. She said she would have voted for it. He said he would have voted against it. Unlike Theron, who is my friend, when I disagree, I don't call someone, say they're mistaken. They basically have very strong opposing views on the Affordable Care Act and the American Health Care Act. I think most people in the district would find the Affordable Care Act lacking, unless it threatens their own personal coverage.
I think if there's any district in the country, particularly in the Southeast, that's going to benefit tremendously from the repeal and replace of Obamacare, it's the 6th District.
How so?
Well, because of what Karen said, and she said it in narrative, which I thought was very impactful, talking about she and Steve, her husband, are on the exchange, and they have seen their premiums quadruple and their minimum payments before they start getting coverage also quadruple to $10,000 a year. That's happening all over this country, and that is happening to people in this district. So for the most part, the people in this district are largely affluent. They do get employer-based coverage. So a lot of what is appealing about Obamacare in many districts doesn't really apply here because of that.
So many are self-employed like the Handels. And like myself, and like you.
And like me.
We're both on the exchange as well.
Thank God my wife works for the state. You know?
But here's the thing, Jovita, and I'm not going to let Brian confuse you. The American Health Care Act is the most unpopular piece of legislation, period. It is not only unpopular across the land, it is unpopular in the 6th District. The clear defining moment is when Jon stepped up and said, listen, the big issue I have with this piece of legislation is that it does away with funding for people who have pre-existing conditions. What Karen Handel tried to do is come back and say, oh, well, it's me, feel sorry for me. I have a person in my family who had a pre-existing condition as well. Well, that's fine and that's okay, but it's up until this point to say that. I think the other thing is that if it was so popular, then she will be running on that. But to Bill's point earlier, she can't run and be pro the American Health Care Act because it's so unpopular because of how it's going to basically defund all the great success of the Affordable Care Act, but also it's President Trump tied to it. And I think the thing that I want to echo before we went to the segment is that President Trump and her connection to him today is going to turn this race. I guarantee you now, when people turn on their television ads tomorrow and radio, you're going to see clips tying Karen Handel to a very unpopular president in that district.
Okay. And look, let me tell you what, just as unpopular in the district is Nancy Pelosi, and we heard Karen Handel say her name maybe 10 times in this debate.
Yeah, but Nancy Pelosi is a former speaker who does not,
she's the minority
none
leader
of her
of the
votes
House
in California, okay, will affect people directly in the 6th District. With this unpopular and unfit and unhinged president, the decisions that he's making will directly affect the people in the 6th District.
I would have advised, I wasn't asked, to more closely link him to Hank Johnson, who is not that well received in the 6th District. He is the congressman from the 4th District, and perhaps ask on the House Armed Services Committee, where he served in staff position, what Hank Johnson did.
Yeah, but let's not be unfair to Congressman Johnson.
I'm not being unfair.
It's not unfair.
It's no more unfair than you speak to.
If Jon Ossoff reflects Hank Johnson's values, he does not need to be the 6th District Congressman. But yes.
Hank Johnson is not running for
Neither
Congress.
is Nancy Pelosi right now.
Pelosi, right? Yeah. But
neither is Donald Trump.
But my point is that Hank Johnson is a very popular congressman in his district who has won convincingly multiple times.
As a resident of the 4th, I would differ on that point. I won't say
and he
you're
wouldn't
wrong.
Win the 6th
Is it not true?
And he would
not win the 6th.
That's what matters.
For the 6th.
Okay,
but neither is Donald
Trump.
Trump.
He's not running for the 6th. Okay, so let me ask you this. Do you think that Karen Handel, by talking about being on the exchange herself, she and her husband, did that humanize her a little bit?
Yes, and I think she needed a little bit more.
Did that make her a little softer, you think?
I think she needed some more of that.
Women might feel a little warm and fuzzy to her? Or
as well as talking about her sister.
No.
Yes,
no, let me tell you why. Because
you're filibustering here.
No, I'm not filibustering.
Karen made it personal, and she told narrative, and that's how voters relate to candidates the best. Jon Ossoff, in return, responded as Al Gore. It was this robotic, I know a lot about policy response. And did he look like he knew a lot? Yeah, he did. He looked very polished and like he had some depth on policy, but it was boring. And I do think that her personal stories broke through the noise much better than his wonky policy answers.
I think the head movements and all, he's actually a little bit more like, it's a way back school, folks, for the audience at home, but Michael Dukakis, the governor of Massachusetts in 1988, who also was a wonk.
I'm not going to get up here and mock Karen Handel. I'm not going to get up here and talk about her age. I'm not going to talk about how no, this is what you guys are doing. I'm not going to talk about how she moved her head from side to side, right?
I said how
No, you did. You just did that, Bill.
Yes, I did, because he moved his head from
side
to side.
But see, they're filibustering and they're deflecting. What you saw tonight is a candidate in Jon Ossoff who did much better than a lot of people thought he was going to do. And these two gentlemen know that. Number two, when it comes to the issue of humanization in this race, I think Jon was the first person to talk about how he experienced meeting the young man. I think his name was Matt, who was 7 years old.
7 years old.
Okay? But if Karen Handel, she should have said that a long time ago. But the fact of the matter is that when she was in the position to make a decision on what could she do to make sure that women had access to breast cancer screening, she basically led the effort to defund it. She led the effort to take it away from them. And that's the bottom line. And it's been reported. And I think that that's the clear distinction between the two messages tonight.
Let's go to some sound. We're talking about that exchange, and there was at one point where Karen Handel turned to Jon Ossoff to address him directly.
My sister has a pre-existing condition. She was born without an esophagus. And for you to suggest that I would do anything that would negatively affect her is absolutely outrageous and unacceptable. The facts are, ladies and gentlemen, that the bill in the Senate right now, it provides more protections for individuals with pre-existing conditions. No, you would not be able to be rejected from a plan. If you have a plan on the Obamacare exchange or another plan, you cannot be charged more, nor can you be told that you can't have a plan because of your pre-existing condition. And in regards to Komen, for anyone to think that as one individual employee, I was able to wave a magic wand and make something like that happen. It was a business decision ultimately decided by the board of Komen. And I have been working on women's health issues for nearly my entire life. I worked for Marilyn Quayle, coordinating her breast cancer activities, helping to get October established as Breast Cancer Awareness Month, helping to get the first Office of Women's Health established at the NIH. At Komen, I was instrumental in protecting the funding at the state level and the federal level for the breast and cervical cancer screening program. And on top of that, I have held the hand of friends who have fought breast cancer and other types of women's reproductive cancers. And I will not be lectured by you or anyone else.
With all due respect, Secretary Handel, with respect to the Komen Foundation, in 2012, you were discussing how you led the effort to defund breast cancer screenings at Planned Parenthood. You were campaigning on your centrality in the decision to defund breast cancer screenings at Planned Parenthood. Indeed, it was reported in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution within the last week that you engineered the decision to defund breast cancer screenings at Planned Parenthood. So some clarity with respect to your role in the matter, whether you were telling the truth when you were campaigning on your role in this decision several years ago, or telling the truth now as you avoid responsibility for it, might be helpful for the voters.
Okay, so that was part of the exchange there, talking about health care. Bill, you were going to say something before I went to that, and then we have
And
to
I'm not a
continue.
spokesman for the Susan Komen Foundation. They are one of the largest private research funders of cancer research. And as I understand it, in the areas of women's health, they fund significantly ovarian and other cervical cancers.
Right.
But they've never been a large funder of mammograms. They were accepting money from the Susan Komen Foundation ostensibly to expand into more breast cancer screenings, but the money wasn't being spent there. When the Susan Komen Foundation, this is documented elsewhere, not by me and not just in Karen Handel's book, asked her as a vice president in charge of public affairs and engagement where to put their money, she recommended pulling out of Planned Parenthood. It wasn't about reducing breast cancer research. It wasn't about reducing mammograms. It was about taking money away from a agency who they didn't believe was spending their money correctly. And I don't think she accomplished explaining it that way, but that's my understanding of what she did.
Right.
I think she was really ready for this attack, and she planned for that. When she talked about the Trump budget, she said, I like that it balances, I like that he's finally cutting spending, but I disagree with him on science research, and particularly as it relates to cancer research. I think she went straight at that to inoculate herself from that attack, and I think her response was powerful and it was personal, and it took what could have been a really devastating blow. Theron likes to talk about the hard time that Republicans are having attracting college-educated white females. It's one of his favorite topics, and I think she was speaking directly to them with what she said on that issue.
Well, it certainly seems like they're speaking to women whenever they bring up that issue of health care mostly. So, Theron, any comment about that exchange between the two of them?
Look, I think Jon did a really good job of basically stating facts, and that's something that, you know, she, to Bill's point, she didn't really explain clearly her reasoning for trying to say that she was not at the helm when this decision was made. But the fact of the matter is that she was there, she participated in the decision, and I think that it's an ad that Jon Ossoff's campaign is running that's been very effective, and I think ultimately it's going to hurt her.
All right, thank you. Stand by. We want to know what our viewers think. Who won the debate? Go to WSB-TV.com/vote now. You can weigh in. The results will be instantly updated. We're going to have those new numbers throughout our coverage tonight. Again, that's WSB-TV.com/vote now. We do want to hear from you. Now, the candidates were essentially tied heading into tonight's debate. Here is the latest exclusive WSB-TV landmark communications poll. just days now before, well, this was going into tonight's debate. Democrat Jon Ossoff holding a slight lead over Karen Handel, but it is within that margin of error, which of course those undecideds. Channel 2's Justin Farmer moderated the debate you saw live on Channel 2. He joins us now with the president of Landmark Communications from our newsroom. Justin?
Hello, Javita. Here with pollster Mark Roundtree, Landmark Communications. Javita just talked about your latest numbers. And I'm so glad that you came to us with this, Javita, because in chatting with Mark before we went on camera, he's being very generous with us tonight and all of our viewers, people here joining us on Facebook and at WSB-TV.com, because I've pressed him. So, Mark, you have information even since the Friday polling. So here on the Tuesday after the Friday polling. And where's the trend going in this race with 14 days to go?
This was a very important debate for both candidates to do very well in. In the first election, obviously, Jon Ossoff carried quite a lot of the vote, 65% of the early vote. Our poll has this a 1-point race as of a week ago for Jon Ossoff. What's changed in the runoff election is the Republican vote has shifted and decided to sort of come out. In the last election, in the first election on April 18th, 33% of the voters were Republican, had a Republican vote history. This time that number today approached nearly 38% of the voters who have voted so far. Democratic vote has gone down precipitously from 40% of the vote in the first election down to 33% today. So there has been a significant change in early voting for Karen Handel.
Predict for us, please. When you look at a debate like this, the first prime time, this live, the reach of WSB, I don't mind saying. Where do you think we are on your numbers in a week? Guess for me. Where do you think this race stands in your numbers a week from today, which would leave us a week from Election Day?
I don't think anything shifted tonight in terms of the overall numbers of the debate. Karen Handel, I think, had strengths. The issues she was, I guess, more comfortable seeming to talk about were issues such as national defense, national security, Iran, issues that really play well with the Republican base. Jon Ossoff was more comfortable talking about Planned Parenthood, it seemed, but Jon may have had a little bit of a weakness because he didn't exhibit passion, and I think he was very professional, very respectful, but I do think that he maybe didn't give some of the emotion that people want to see in political candidates. I think if you graded him from like a college grading program, I think he probably won the debate, but I think for a political campaign, she won the debate. The trajectory of this probably will be that a week from now, unless something significant changes, I think that Karen Handel will continue to do well.
So are you predicting a victory for her?
No, I'm just saying an early vote. Last time, Ossoff took 65% of the vote. This time, he may be coming in around 53% by the end. We'll see, based on the current trajectory of what's happening.
So are you in a position to predict a winner in 2 weeks?
Well, no, certainly not. But I think Handel probably needs to carry 47% of the early vote. She can afford to lose it because Election Day is the day where Republicans normally vote in bigger numbers. So I think that you're going to see.
Voted for Trump, including Brian. I didn't. I want them to live with it. Every bad decision is.
What was the best moment for each candidate tonight, or maybe a tough moment for the candidates? Does anything come to mind?
Best moment, certainly Karen Handel's question, I think, of where do you live was one. I think she exhibited a lot of emotion talking about her sister for a moment. I think everybody sort of paused for a moment on that, having the issue that she hasn't really talked publicly about before. I think that was a weak point for Mr. Ossoff. I think he probably reacted a little bit stilted, a little maybe more Al Gore-ish. I think his strength was probably staying on the offense and staying on message with Planned Parenthood. What was interesting is he didn't cast that in terms of an abortion debate. He cast it in terms of women's health care. He was going for the first base hit instead of the grand slam, so to speak, on that issue.
Excellent, Mark Roundtree. We can't wait to see your numbers in a week.
Thank you.
Can I get a poll from you in a week?
Yes. How about Thursday?
Thursday? It just takes money?
Just Thursday.
All right. All right. Thank you, Mark Roundtree. Javita, when I send it back to you, I don't know if your whole crowd is on IFB, Javita, but from my chair, so to speak, from the debate room tonight in the studio, Javita, are you there?
Yes,
okay,
Justin,
great.
I'm here.
Here's what struck me when I saw on the faces sort of each of them, when it came to the topic, Javita, of minimum wage, where he said he was for a livable wage, and it sounded like she said, and I want to go back and watch it sounded like to me she said she was not for one, and she talked about she didn't want to restrict small businesses in the 6th. What did you all hear, and how do you all interpret that playing?
Yes, Justin, so we've talked about that,
Okay.
and she actually used the word livable wage. Justin was asking about that. He says that he felt like that was a pivotal moment in the debate when she said, "I do not support a livable wage," was how she said it. We've talked about that. Let's move on really quickly, though. Justin's going to go back and listen to the tape. We want you to remember to go to WSB-TV.com/vote now to weigh in on who you think won tonight's debate, Republican Karen Handel or the Democrat Jon Ossoff. That's WSB-TV.com/vote now. And we are going to have some results of that as soon as you weigh in. And here are some results. Right now, most of those who have voted are saying they believe is that Jon Ossoff with 75%. That print is very small.
Yes. And 25%.
25% of our viewers right now voting for Karen Handel winning the debate. The results are going to update instantly whenever you vote. We'll see them on the screen. Just go to WSB-TV.com/vote now to weigh in. So I'm going to tell Justin, too, to check Twitter, because certainly that "I do not support a livable wage" line of hers blew up on Twitter as well. So all those millennials there who are watching.
I would agree with Brian. It's not an issue of great substance in the 6th district, but it'll make a powerful TV spot.
Right.
And it was the biggest gaffe if you're looking at that as a measurement instrument for the debate.
And let me ask you, so while we're talking about this, so with the race so close, we talked about the numbers. Each candidate, we know, they needed to have a good night tonight. So let's talk about memorable moments. So let's listen to some sound now. I think we're going to hear first Karen Handel. This is considered a memorable moment tonight.
You might live just 5 minutes outside of the district, but your values are nearly 3,000 miles away in San Francisco. And that's why so many of your contributions have come from liberals of California, New York, and Massachusetts. It's why you're supported by Nancy Pelosi. And folks, it matters. It's no wonder that my opponent didn't want to do the Atlanta Press Club debate. It was going to be aired on CNN, where all folks from around the country, all of his liberal supporters were going to see it, and the fake Jon Ossoff was going to collide with the real Jon Ossoff, who is a Nancy Pelosi-backed liberal.
Okay, now hold your thoughts. Let's listen to one of Jon Ossoff's memorable moments from tonight.
Secretary Handel has a lot of partisan attacks that she's launching, but she hasn't provided any explanation for how she's going to serve the people of this community. She's a career politician who's dead set on imposing her own views on this community, whether it's gutting protections for people who need protection from price increases if they have pre-existing conditions, whether it's defunding life-saving breast cancer screenings at Planned Parenthood, whether it's endorsing a tax reform proposal before we even know what its impact on deficits and growth would be. What we need is an independent voice substantively focused on the issues of concern to this community, not another career politician who's run 6 times for 5 different offices.
Okay, so there you go. Theron, you want to start first?
Yeah, I want to start off by saying something that I know that Bill and Brian didn't want to recognize, but 75% of your viewers say that Jon Ossoff won this debate tonight. And I think
called the number out to her.
Yeah, but I know. But my point is, is that I think it clearly shows, and I'm sure a lot of these folks live in the 6th district, is that the people who watched this debate tonight saw something clearly different than what Brian saw. They saw a young man who was poised, who had a plan, and who basically stood up to this career politician. The thing that I think that he did a really good job also of driving home tonight was that he wants to go to Washington to be an independent voice. That means that he'll represent the people with the 3-car garages, but he also will represent the people who live up 400, who are a little bit more affluent, and some of those people's in those pockets of Cobb, DeKalb, and Fulton, who actually live on a livable wage. He will support them as well. And I think he really did a good job of labeling her as a career politician. And one of his best lines, don't cut me off, Bill, one of his best lines was that, yeah, you were born in Washington, you've lived here a long time, but ever since you've lived in Georgia, you've been trying to return to Washington unsuccessfully. I think that was a really, really good line, and it reminds Republicans that they have not elected her to a higher office, even when she ran against Brian's former boss and ran for governor. I mean, she has been unelectable for a very long time, and I think that that was the key point which he really drove home
that he was
tonight.
trying to make. Bill?
I thought that Jon Ossoff had the stronger performance tonight. I thought looking at those 2 moments there, again, stylistically, they're very different, but I thought Karen Handel did a nice job a couple of different times tonight of humanizing herself and making some attacks about, I'm not going to take this from you, you lecturing me about women's health issues given my career and background. I don't think she did as good a job as I've seen her do in other debate performances of again, speaking to her own track record. I hear Brian on the career politician thing, but she has spent more of her life in the public sector than in the private sector, and it's a good track record. So I would have spent more time on that.
Brian?
Well, I think what she did effectively was to point out that when it comes to taxes, she said her number one issue was going to be not raising taxes. It was like something she would never violate. I think that is very important in this particular district. It's a very wealthy district. Marginal tax rate cuts will mean a lot for the families who live in the 6th district, and I don't think Theron's ever been there based on the way that he talks about the district, because going up Georgia 400 is extremely affluent all the way up to the edge of the district. So this is one of the richest districts in the country, and it is a naturally Republican district. That's where Jon Ossoff has gotten away with pretending to be this moderate voice that can attract independents. Tonight, she called him on his bluff. I thought that was very effective. He's going to be a vote against the tax cut. He's going to be a vote to keep Obamacare the way it is and see those premiums continue to soar for Georgia families. And he's going to be a vote for the Iran deal that funds terrorists with U.S. tax dollars.
And she should have stated it the way you just stated it and flipped that around. But yeah, she did that.
But to be clear on the Iran deal, he did not say he would be a vote for. He actually talked about getting a clear picture of what's going on, looking at the complexities of the issues, and then if we are attacked and if our allies are attacked, then he would support it, Brian, because I think that you want to come on here and spend it. But the other thing that he said, Joe Vita, that I thought was very important, is that he said that he would protect voting rights. And at a time where we know that people right now have a lot of concerns about their ability to go out and express their, and I know this is something Brian doesn't support. He doesn't want people to have access to vote.
We don't put words in your mouth.
No. Right. Yes, right.
But my point is that I think that was a really good point. But look, this is the bottom line. This is what this race is going to come down to, Joe Vita. It's either, are you going to go with the old ways of doing things, and you're going to support a party that clearly is made up of older white men, more affluent in that district, or are you going to be, I think, with the growing demographic change and the growing tide that's happening in this country and happening in that district. And I think that the viewers who saw that debate tonight, I think it's a vote of whether you want to move towards the future or you want someone who's going to go to Washington and keep us in the past.
Right.
I think that's the clear different in divisions of the campaigns right now.
I think Theron's done a great job today of showing that Jon Ossoff is the voice for job-killing mandates. He is the voice for soft on terror policies. Thank you, Theron, for clarifying. I totally agree with you. That's what he proved tonight.
Okay, let's listen to Karen Handel when she made that livable wage comment. Let's listen.
Yes, I do. The minimum wage should be a living wage. I think we can raise it indexed to the cost of living because the cost of living varies widely in urban and rural areas and in different states across this country. I think that increase needs to be implemented at a pace that allows business owners to adapt their business plans so they're not shocked, their business plans are not shocked by a sudden increase in labor costs.
I do not support a livable wage. What I support is making sure that we have an economy that is robust with low taxes and less regulation so that those small businesses that would be dramatically hurt if you impose higher minimum wages on them are able to do what they do best, grow jobs and create good paying jobs for people in the 6th district.
Okay, so she said it. I guess the question is, did she mean to say it? Did she mess up her words? Is that what she was trying to convey?
She will issue a clarification, but it's on tape.
Right.
And
it's on Twitter.
And it's on Twitter.
Everyone's talking about
in the markets where they've actually done this, like Seattle SeaTac, they actually have employees coming in asking for fewer hours because they're losing other social service benefits because of the wage they're making. It is a job killer. It does. Ask McDonald's, that's rolling out at 10,000 of their stores right now, company-owned and franchised kiosks. Talk to Wendy's and Arby's and all these other companies that rather than boost the wages of their employees to $15 an hour, they're making automation changes. Now, without that mandate in place, Walmart, Target, and the leading retailers in the big box category all raised their minimum wage to $10, $11, and $12 over the last year. But what, Theron, is a livable wage?
I tell you, if she were running in the 13th district, south of the city, if she were running in the 5th district, where there's a liberal majority in those districts,
that's a wedge
that
issue.
would be a gaffe. That could be used against her. But if Jon Ossoff pulls that issue over the next week to see if they should do an ad on it, it will poll very low with 6th district voters because it is not an issue in this district.
You just don't think it matters.
It just doesn't matter.
It might hit with some millennials, but I would agree that it's not bread and butter.
And that is less than 10% of this electorate.
Yeah.
You know, we talked earlier about humanization, right? And we talked earlier about how Karen Handel made this attempt to show that she was human, right? That she wasn't this Republican robot who was just going to run the typical Republican playbook. I think where it really just strikes me is that when I hear individuals on this panel basically to discredit a livable wage, which is majority of people who live in the state and majority of people of color and majority of people who are actually Republicans, many of them rural, who actually live on a livable wage.
What is that,
But
Theron?
hold on, don't cut me off, Bill. I didn't cut you off.
Asking just a question.
Okay, no, it's fine. I think that it shows how out of touch the Republican Party is with the American people. What she's going to have to do, because if you look at this, it's not just millennials. I think a person who is making minimum wage, or someone who's making less than $40,000 or $30,000, or someone who's lost their job, who's actively seeking work, who's very educated but has probably have to take a lesser paying job to provide for their family, I think those voters are the ones that's going to be offended today. Not these small businesses, not these affluent people who are making a lot of money. I think that to come on television and say that you do not support livable wage was a big mistake on her campaign. Now, I hope that she meant minimum wage, because that was the question.
Right.
And I think what
And
Jon
increasing the minimum wage was
and
the
I think what
question.
Jon Ossoff said is that, yeah, I not only support increasing the minimum wage, I also support a livable wage, which is two kind of different things, but also similar as well.
He was clarifying the point. Okay, so we want to know who you believe won tonight's debate. Go to WSB-TV.com/vote now. You can weigh in. Thousands of you have already voted. We thank you for that. Again, go to WSB-TV.com/vote now, and we will get those results instantly. They will show up on the screen. So let's take a look. We should have some new results already. And it looks like the numbers just moved slightly, right?
74 to 26.
74 to 26% now. Those of you
And I had
voting,
no difficulty reading those numbers.
Those are, I would need to put on my glasses. So our viewers right now believing that Jon Ossoff, 74% of our viewers voting for Jon Ossoff as the winner of tonight's debate. Again, as you vote, those numbers instantly update for us. So where to go? WSB-TV.com/vote now, and that's how you can weigh in. So for many people, many viewers, the endless ads about these two candidates have helped shape opinions up until our debate tonight. A lot of people, this may have been the first time actually hearing Jon Ossoff speak, I think, too. This is the most expensive House race in U.S. history. Channel 2's Justin Farmer moderated the debate. He joins us now with an associate professor for Emory University's Department of Political Science, Dr. Andra Gillespie. Justin.
Thanks, Javita. And yes, Dr. Gillespie and I became friends last summer when we were at the convention, so great to see you again.
You too.
And you're a professor at Emory, and so you're with the young minds all the time. Before we touch on a couple of different topics, I just want to ask you from your chair, and I know you're one person, who performed more aptly tonight?
Well, I think this is going to end up being a draw. So I think Ossoff supporters are going to be energized by his performance, his being professional, and I think that Handel supporters are going to be energized by her energy and passion. That some people have criticized her for not having this campaign cycle. One of the big gaffes that I think a lot of people are going to talk about is the Handel livable wage gaffe. So I think Democrats are going to try to capitalize on that. I'm sure there are probably memes on social media right now, and I would not be surprised if there were an ad generated from that as a means to try to stimulate Democratic turnout in the district.
In the social media realm, is there a connection between social media activity of a campaign and voter turnout, meaning success? Do we know do we have data on this yet?
Well, this is still ongoing research, but we know from the history of voter mobilization research that personal reminders get people to turn out to vote. So the gold standard is still face-to-face canvassing. So if somebody knocks on your door and asks you to turn out to vote, you're predicted to turn out, your probability of turning out is about 9 percentage points higher. But there are other things that can also work. Personal phone calls, we know text messages work. And it seems to be that the underlying idea is making sure that somebody gets a reminder and that it's a reminder that they internalize. So there are other things that don't work. So for instance, all of those pre-recorded voicemail messages, they don't work. And part of the reason why they don't work is that a lot of us probably delete them so we never actually hear the message. So I would hypothesize based on that, and other people are doing the work on this now, that if somebody is actually reading a Facebook message, that's likely going to increase their likelihood of turning out to vote. The thing is trying to figure out the right mode to get people to actually read and receive the message and then internalize the reminder.
Dr. Gillespie, my last question for you I was a political science major myself 142 years ago, and here's the question. Do you find that more of your students, and you know, give me some liberty here with this, but generally speaking, are you finding that the majority of your students are choosing to major in political science because of an ideological draw, or do you find instead that they are interested in our system or its foreign relations? You understand? So is it more ideological, or is it the curious mind in how governments work?
Well, my experience at Emory over the past dozen years suggests that you have different types of majors in political science. In my department, we have a political science major and an international studies major. So you have your pre-law people, and so they're majoring in political science because that's a feeder major for law school. And then we have lots of students who are interested in international studies. They're interested in the world, and so they either want to go work for an NGO or a nonprofit, or they may want to do work in comparative politics and understand how institutions work, not just in the United States, but also all over the world.
There it is. There you have it. All right, we're going to send it back inside to my colleague, Javita Moore, inside of our Studio C. Javita?
All right, Andra and Justin, thank you so much. So we've heard from the candidates during tonight's primetime debate live on Channel 2. Let me ask you this before we close tonight, gentlemen. Let's talk about their next move leading up to the runoff. So, Bill, what do you think? We've got 2 weeks left. What does each candidate need to do from tonight going
Identify
forward?
and activate your turnout. And the 45,000 people that have voted between Tuesday and today, or yesterday, Monday, 24,000 of those will be in Fulton. That was the county that saved Karen Handel and pulled her into the runoff. 13,000 of those in DeKalb, which is where Jon Ossoff's strength was, 58% in the April election. And at the remaining 8,000 in Cobb, which was still double what they had in the April election. So this is about identifying who your voters are from this point on and getting them out there, whether it's getting them out to vote early, which the Ossoff campaign did extremely well in April, but was noted by pollster Mark Roundtree, that ground game doesn't appear to be quite as strong. I've heard anecdotally they don't have the canvassers that they had in the April election back out in the neighborhoods as effectively. They may still be coming, I don't know, but we haven't seen them yet.
I've certainly seen less in my neighborhood than I did in the first round for Jon Ossoff. And I think we've got several things going in Karen Handel's favor at this juncture. The early voting returns are much more favorable to Republicans than the first round were, where he won more than 60% of the early vote. That's not going to be the case in this election, and Republicans do a better job of turning out on Election Day. So we have a strong, close, and competitive early voting. We're going to be in really good shape for Karen Handel going into Election Day. I thought tonight was very important because she needed to break through the noise of these ads, which I think are just washing over people now. We've seen way too many, and not that I know WSB is loving all the ads. I'm sure
we like them. Yeah, but we've seen way too many of them.
I see them on Amazon. They're everywhere.
They're everywhere.
And I thought tonight was, I give the panel credit, and I give the candidates credit, both of them. They were substantive, they were true to their policy positions, and they showed clear, distinct choices. The thing is, in this election, in this district, the clear, distinct choice benefits Karen Handel because most voters are going to prefer the conservative message still, even though we're in this crazy time where Donald Trump is nationalizing this election and changing the dynamics. But she reminded people that she is the common sense, mainstream conservative in this race, and he is not who he says he is.
So a point of clarification, someone who's actually won a runoff election before. The reason why people are probably not seeing as many canvassers and it's not getting as much outreach in your neighborhood as you were before, because clearly you are a Karen Handel voter, and I'm not sure where Bill is. And so if you have already made up your mind, like I believe 90% of the people in the district have done so, you're not going to canvass it. It's a colossal waste of resources. What the Ossoff campaign has got to do is that they got to continue to focus on the base voters that came out and the base voters that did not come out. And so they got to do that. Number two is that I think he's got to come back with a really good ad to really attack her on this whole gaffe around livable wage. I think that he's got to appeal to the working class people in this district. Thirdly, I think now he's got to really kick it into overdrive. I think he's got to come out and really tell the people what he's going to be for. He's got to talk about jobs. He's got to talk about health care. He's got to amplify his strength on foreign affairs. Whether he has clearance or not, he clearly showed a in-depth knowledge on what to do. And lastly, I think that he's got to talk about being an independent voice and being a vote for the future. And unlike Karen Handel, which he stated today, is that he's willing to go to Washington and not only work with one Republican in the White House or one in the Congress, he said, I'll work with the entire Republican delegation. Karen Handel made it very clear. I'm a career politician who's mad, who's selfish, and I don't want to work with anyone. I just want to go to Washington to be this conservative that these Republicans want me to be. I think that's the message that he's got to put out. It's got to be a message of inclusion, a message of wanting to go to Washington to be an independent voice and try to bring this country together.
All right. Thank you, Theron and Brian and Bill. We want to take one more look at who our viewers are thinking won the debate tonight. These are instant updates that we're getting. Voters so far, according to what we last saw, are voting for Jon Ossoff as the winner of this debate. I think it bumped up a little bit, 73 now to 27%. You can still weigh in. Just go to WSB-TV.com/vote now, and you can support the candidate who you thought won tonight's debate. Thousands of you have already voted, and we appreciate that. We want you to continue to do so. Again, it's WSB-TV.com/vote now, and we want to thank you. I thank you guys for being here with us tonight. Thanks for your patience and your time. And we want to thank all of you for joining us for the 6th Congressional District debate and this special live post-debate coverage from Channel 2 Action News. Be sure to join us tonight on the Channel 2 Action News Night Beat at 11 for new reaction and insight into the impact on this race moving forward from tonight. There are 2 more weeks until Election Day. And as you know, you can count on Channel 2 Action News for comprehensive coverage leading up to the runoff election June 20th. Join us for live Team 2 coverage on Election Day from the moment the polls open, 7 a.m. to when all of the votes are counted that night. And we will see you tonight on the Night Beat at 11.
Jalapeno double cheeseburger, only $2.49.